The biggest reason AI often feels overwhelming comes down to this main thing, and that's context. So most of the time you ask it something and the response just feels generic. It doesn't sound like you, it misses important details, or gives you something that's just not quite what you were looking for. And the same happens when you start giving it real tasks to complete. It goes away, it does something different to what you intended it to do. And you're left thinking, you know what, it's not quite there yet. But in most cases, the issue isn't the AI itself, but rather it comes down to the context that it's working with. When it comes to AI, the output is only as good as the input. When you use models like ChatGPT or Claude, generally without giving them much context, they're working from broad training data and information that's available within that conversation thread. They have a huge amount of general knowledge, but they don't know your specific situation, your preferences, your business, or what a good answer looks like for you. And that's why the output can often feel generic. The model is trying to give the most useful response based on limited information. The more context you provide, the more specific and relevant the output becomes. It's not that the AI isn't capable, it's that without the right context, it doesn't have enough information to tailor the response properly. And this applies to conversational tasks like drafting a message, replying to an email, or creating a piece of content. It becomes even more important when you move it into AI actually executing work for you. So that could be through Claude Code or Codex, where you give an AI more responsibility to complete tasks on your behalf. And the principle stays the same. The better the instructions, examples, and information that you provide, the better the outcome that you get. It needs to understand what you're trying to achieve, what good looks like, and have access to the right context from your business to work with. So for us, for example, most of that context is spread across a number of tools. So for example, we use Fireflies to record our calls, and that gives our AI access to things like our Teams calls, our client catch-ups, our sales conversations. It's able to identify common objections, the types of businesses that we work with, the services that we offer, how we actually communicate with our prospects. Same with we use Slack. It gives agents access to how we communicate as a team internally, how we communicate with clients in Slack, how decisions are made, how projects are moved forward. Again, the same applies to our CRM, to our emails. The more context you give, the better it understands how to operate. And this could also apply to asking AI to create content, a PDF, a report, an image. The more examples you give it of previous work, brand references, what you actually want that output to look like, the more relevant the context that you give it, the closer the output is to what you want in the end. And over time, that context compounds. Every time you give feedback or you update preferences or you add examples or clarify what you're looking for, you're improving the way the AI works with you. It's the same as bringing in someone new into your team. On day one, they need context. You need to explain your business, how things work, what good looks like, and what to avoid. And then over time, you're giving them feedback, you're correcting them on things, and you show them how you want things done. And the more context they have, the better they can operate within the business. So AI works in a similar way. The same way people need context, so too does AI. So a big thing is when it comes to client communication, so via WhatsApp or email, plenty of people are skeptical around using AI. And I get it. Nobody wants a client on the other end getting a reply that sounds robotic, automated, or just AI slop. And it doesn't sound like it's coming from you or your team. But if you take the previous conversations you've had or your general style and you use that as a guide, it stops AI sounding generic and it has it more sounding like you. Same tone, same phrasing, same way you'd usually open and sign off. So there's many different ways you can provide this context to AI. So I'll use ChatGPT as an example. If you're using your simple ChatGPT interface, if you go to settings, personalization, you have custom instructions there. The same thing with Claude. They also have that memory aspect. And with that as well, you can also toggle on or off the memory on ChatGPT or Claude. When it gets something right, you just ask it to remember what it's done. When it gets something wrong, say, remember not to do that again. And it saves those persistent notes over time. And that's where the tool compounds to how you need it to act. So if you have this set up already, you might have noticed that the more you're using your ChatGPT or the more you're using your Claude, the better the results that you're getting compared to a year ago or 6 months ago. Another key trick that I use is using voice notes. So speaking to ChatGPT or speaking to Claude and giving as much context as possible, because you could speak a lot more than writing. It's just a much more efficient way to get across what you're looking for. Another big thing is ask it questions, or get it to ask you questions. So say to it, look, ask me as many questions as possible to help you clarify exactly what it is I'm looking for. And then it will tell you the missing context that it has. Another key way, again, if you're using your ChatGPT or your Claude, are on ChatGPT, you have custom GPTs that you can feed documents into, give instructions to. The same with Claude projects. So we found this really useful. If you take a lot of sales conversations, put it into a Claude project, you can go in and ask, okay, what are the most common objections we're getting? Or what are the most common questions that are coming up? And it can pull from that data and give you a real tailored response. That's from, I guess, your basic use from your ChatGPT or your Claude. Where this really shifts is with your Claude Code or your Codex. So when you get into these tools, your Claude Code and Codex, you're not chatting anymore. You're now giving AI responsibility to actually go and do the work within your business. And the principle here doesn't change. It just gets that bit more powerful. The best way to think about it is genuinely, if you were to have a new member of staff come in tomorrow, how would you train them up? You give them an induction. Here's the business. Here's how we do things. Here's what to do. Here's what not to do. And that's your instructions file. Within Claude Code, they're called a Claude.md, and in Codex, it's called an agents.md. So you drop one in a folder, and the tool reads that MD, that instruction file, every time. The more context up front means there's less back and forth. And to go back to the analogy of a new hire, so the longer they spend within your team, the more they build up an understanding of the business. And within your Claude or your Codex, that's what we would call a memory file. So they persist between sessions. So over months, you end up with an agent that knows your business more. So that context is compounding. Then there are jobs you only want to explain once. How we run onboarding, how we build proposals, how we do a weekly review. You wouldn't want to reteach a hire every single time how to do that. So that's what we would call skills. That's written once and it's available every session forever. So kind of like the employee manual on how to do onboarding, or the employee manual on how to send a weekly review. That's what we would put in a skill that your agent would use as their own employee manual. Another thing as well is you wouldn't send your receptionist to go off and do accounts, or your salesperson to do HR. So you split them by department. And that's where we would have sub-agents. So a sales sub-agent, a marketing sub-agent, an ops sub-agent, each one with their own context and their own remit. And the whole thing runs on the same feedback loop you'd run with the person. When it does something you didn't want, you correct it, and that correction gets written back into the instructions or the memory. So the same mistake doesn't happen twice. And it's the same principle everywhere. Instructions, examples, feedback. Same with a new member of staff, it's the exact same with your agents. So if the output you're getting from AI feels generic or feels off, or it's just not hitting the mark, the first thing to look at is what you've actually given it to work with. Tools like ChatGPT or Claude give you some ways to add context, like custom instructions, like custom GPTs, projects, and memory. Where this really gets powerful is with Claude Code and Codex, with your skills, your memory files, your agents, and your Claude MDs. So if the output you're getting from AI feels generic or off, or it just doesn't sound like you, ask yourself, what have you actually given it to work with? If you're interested in digging into this in a bit more detail, I've included a guide in the link below. As well as that, we'll be posting a lot more videos of technical setups or how we're running these agents in our own business or our client's business on a day-to-day.